Hi, I'm staff political reporter Henry Cook, and I'm with the national leader Simon Bridges here for our weekly slot. Just going over some issues that are kind of dominating politics this week. Waka jumping, or the Electoral Integrity Amendment Bill. It's in the House today. They're trying to pass it third reading. Will you guys commit to repealing it if you get voted in 2020?
Yes, we will. We'll definitely repeal it. We think it's repugnant to democracy. I mean, without going through the history, I think there's centuries of thought and practice about what an MP is and their ability to actually be able to stand up from time to time and say, you know, we disagree with our party. And frankly speaking, in today's politics, of course, we know that it's a Winston Peters thing where he really wants complete control of his caucus and the ability to say, no, you're with me, right or wrong, and we just cannot go along with that. We'll repeal it.
What if in coalition negotiations with the only party you can really go into government with right now in the current polling, New Zealand First, Winston Peters' party, he said, no, that's my bottom line. Everything else is fine, but the bottom line is we keep waka jumping. Is it worth giving up government over?
I suppose it's not responsible for me to sort of do a coalition negotiation now and say this, that or the other thing. That's not a I would go with or I won't go with New Zealand First. I mean, we would have to see the cards that the public of New Zealand dealt with us. But I think it'd be clear for a national party and a national-led government, we would repeal this because we think it's, as I say, repugnant to democracy.
If it will probably pass this week, despite your best efforts, will you commit to not?
Oh, they're going hard in the House right at this moment.
Right at this moment, extended sitting hours. Will you
the public should be watching. This is must-see viewing.
You should be watching stuff. Will you commit to not using the powers that it'll give you? Because as a party leader, you'll be given some pretty strong powers here.
Look, that's a great question. I haven't really thought of or considered much, to be honest. I think it's incredibly unlikely the best scenario where I would use it.
But you won't commit, just to be clear. You're not committing to not using the powers.
I think I won't use it. Yeah.
But can you see an edge case maybe where something really comes up and you go, I really don't want this MP to be part of my party?
No, I can't at the current time. I think it's, as I say, a bill that's repugnant to democracy. I think in the instance where someone felt incredibly strongly about a particular issue in Parliament, were it a moral issue or were it a particular issue affecting their electorate, there's no question I would not use it.
Do you find it ironic that Winston Peters once jumped from your party and actually sued National when they tried to kind of kick him off the ballot?
I am beyond ironies when it comes to Winston Peters. There are more inconsistencies and flip-flops than you can kind of possibly imagine.
On another issue that's been in the House this week, there was an urgent debate on Meka Whaitiri and her reason her firing as a minister yesterday. Yeah. We can't really go into the allegations because you're not protected by privilege here. But Amy Adams, your finance spokesman, was saying quite strongly basically that she shouldn't be an MP. Isn't that exactly the case for waka jumping? I mean, I just think the idea couldn't force her under the current law to stop being an MP, could she?
Oh, I think the truth is, if you look back at the history of Parliament, just in the recent past, actually, there's been a number of instances where, John Key didn't want an MP, or they were a minister. Actually, they'd been beyond the pale. I think of Richard Worth. He left almost automatically. Pansy Wong. If I sit here long enough, I'll probably think of others. So I think there are ways of disciplining as a leader, of being fair and firm on issues that don't require this bill, and we've seen them, as I say, over the last just decade, let alone decades and decades.
So party leaders can kind of give an expectation that someone resign without necessarily having to have the power of law behind them.
Yeah, and then there are, of course, other examples where that person has stayed in Parliament. Brendan Horan. Now, I think in a sense you could say, well, that's a bit different, but it is a situation where he was no longer in a caucus, but for reasons I can't remember, to be honest, he was still in Parliament, not part of that. And that's another solution as well that is short of waka jumping.
On Meka Whaitiri, she obviously disputes his allegations, and they are only allegations at this point, they're not substantiated, but your party seems to think she should step down from Parliament. Other side of the world, Brett Kavanaugh, he's the United States Supreme Court Justice nominee. There's some pretty credible allegations of sexual assault there. Once again, not totally substantiated yet. He's refusing to pull down. Do you think he should still be the nominee?
Oh, look, that's sort of not my fight to fight, Henry. Good try, but not going to. And in truth, I haven't followed it particularly closely. I think in relation to Meka Whaitiri, what you highlight is there's so many questions. You've got the Māori caucus and certainly Willie Jackson going pretty hard on this issue in support of Meka Whaitiri. Well, he says he believes her. Now, with the Prime Minister, we're still in the question of actually what did happen. And if Willie Jackson's right, well, why is she even no longer a minister? So I think there's still many serious questions here, and I'm simply in the position as, I think, a responsible leader of the opposition of asking those questions.
On that, you've been leader of the opposition for quite a while now. You had time to shape the party somewhat. How is the Simon Bridges Party different from the Bill English National Party or the John Key National Party?
Yeah, I think it is different, but it's subtle. I think what I would say is, you think about Bill English, for example, he and I are incredibly different personalities, but we have very similar values. And so the values of the National Party haven't changed. I think we still stand for the same things: less government, the individual, families, competition, go on and on and on. But under me, I think by definition, if you look at John and Bill, they're, what are they, 10, 15 years older than me. So I bring my own flavour, and we're in a process of not changing the values, but modernising, recalibrating for 2020, which will be different from 2008-17.
Have you shifted right in opposition? Bill English was the prisons are immoral and fiscal failure guy. Judith Collins on Twitter this week taking random crime stories that are horrible and have nothing to do with politics and saying that Labour wants to hug these crims, things like that. You're endorsing Donald Trump's drug policy. Is this, oppositions often do shift more to their kind of base.
I don't think we have at all, and I think actually, we can, or we don't have to go into the detail of these things, but if you look at what I'm saying on methamphetamine in state houses, on the American initiative on drugs that's under the UN auspices, I would argue they are evidence-based, that they're in line with not just national supporters. I would say the vast bulk of New Zealanders, actually the positions we've got, and I don't think they are substantively harder, tougher than we were in government. We've always been a party, and if you look at our history over 9 years, Labour liberalised the bail and the parole and I think the sentencing laws in 2007 from memory. We firmed them back up. We did pass 3 strikes. Yes, it was an ACT initiative originally, but actually I was on the select committee. So I don't think there's a change there. I think you could make the case, and by the way, I don't accept this either, but on some things people say, well, yeah, you move to the left. You are trying to engage seriously, and we've talked about it before on climate change. I've been in discussions with the Prime Minister on child poverty. Actually, again though, if you look at that seriously on child poverty, all we are doing is seeking to improve what the Prime Minister is doing with Bill English's legacy of social investment.
On the meth crooks, you mentioned that the line you rolled out last week. Judith Collins rolled that line out about 15 minutes after a report came out. Had you had a discussion with her about how you guys were going to react to this? Because obviously there was a lot of defence you had to do, because it was basically a report which went after, at some level, the last government and the treatment of these people.
Sure.
Did you talk to her before she came out on the radio?
Not specifically. Not before the report, but I certainly said to her, she should follow her convictions on this. I think it was important. I knew that they were in line with my views on it, because it's been really clear that the Housing New Zealand Chief Executive has made quite clear, just in the last few days, that if there was not evidence and they could not establish that the meth was, the harm was caused by you as a tenant, you were rehoused, you were compensated under us.
But there were no baseline tests. You're a former prosecutor. You know that these things wouldn't stand up in court, right? There was no baseline test. How can you make that?
New Zealand made clear they only didn't compensate where they had established that someone had been causing the harm that was a tenant. So it may not be at a, as I've said before on Radio New Zealand, at a criminal beyond reasonable doubt standard. I think that was at a civil standard. And I'm sorry, I know there'll be some out there who say, oh, isn't that terrible? My view is clear, and I reckon most New Zealanders would back me on this. Yes, we should be compassionate about rehousing, but where tenants have either themselves or let people smoke methamphetamine in their homes, they shouldn't be compensated.
These people have very complicated lives. Do you think it's really up to the public to judge them at that level?
Look, people have complicated lives, you're right, there's all manner of circumstances. We want to be compassionate on that. But methamphetamine's a pernicious drug, it's a Class A drug, and I don't think we should be compensating.
What shifted from when the report came out first, the Gluckman report and this report? Because you had a much more conciliatory line then. You said compensation should be explored. You said, we're sorry, we got bad advice.
I don't know if I've said that.
Paula Bennett said that compensation should be explored. So your deputy said that.
I've seen everyone on compensation. What I can tell you is I think my position is entirely consistent, and it's this, that the standard of testing, in good faith, on the evidence back then, was in hindsight too high. Right, that's for sure. But that is a world away from saying on, and no one, by the way, not Phil Twyford, not the report that came out last week, is challenging this, that the testing was flawed in terms of finding methamphetamine in those houses, albeit the standard was too high from a safety of that house perspective.
I think we're almost out of time, but one quick fire before you go. There was that you were too young to vote in the first MMP referendum when it came in, but there was a recent, more recent one around the election. If MMP, if we were in a first past the post position, national in government right now, did you vote yes or no?
I voted for supplementary member. Because I think the days of first past the post are gone. I think we've moved on. There is much about a proportionality and its fairness. That's absolutely right. Could it be improved? Look, I think in principle it could. If it was a straight shootout between FPP and MMP, I'd vote MMP. But if it was more nuanced, and as I say, I got to have a blend of the best of both worlds, like supplementary member, that's where I personally would go. All of that said, let me be at pains to say this is not some driving agenda on the National Party's hit list.
Cool. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you for watching.